Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Black Anvil, Regenesis, out November 4th on Season of Mist. This album has 12 tracks, 50 minutes in length, and this is the band's 5th full-length studio album. They are an American black metal band. From a design point of view, the album is balanced but not overly balanced, and what I mean by that is that this is a record that's very dynamic, that offers you different looks, different feels on a song-by-song basis. It doesn't have a very similar approach track in and track out. Starts off with an intro track that works really well because it has more of the atmospheric side that this album offers at times, that permeates through at times, perhaps more in the second half of the album than in the first half of the album. And then it comes with a track in the middle that breaks the record into two. Silver and Steele is that song, a very different and unique song. You never heard anything like it up until that point, and you're never going to hear anything like it from that point forward. So it has a very distinct flavor to it, it has very distinct characteristics to it, and really creates that middle point of the album. Now in the second half you have an interlude track towards the end, an interlude track that in my opinion doesn't really add much value to the overall fluidity of the record or to the overall characteristics of the album. I honestly felt like the record needed more of an outro track in order to bring it full circle, so that you have a starting point, you have a middle point, and you have an ending point. The way this album finishes, it almost feels more like a cliffhanger and not necessarily an exclamation mark. So I think from a design point of view, that's perhaps the only thing that's really lacking on the way this album is put together. From a sound point of view, the album is black metal through and through. Now, just because it's black metal through and through, it doesn't mean that they don't add different ebbs and flows or different influences or different nuances in order to make the sound expand a little bit more and start to move away from the beaten path, but always returning to those same roots. This obviously makes a more engaging sound. It allows the record to have a lot more life. It allows the record to have a lot more energy. This is a very dark sounding album, and that darkness permeates into evilness. You feel it at every single turn. I mean, outside of the lyrical content, which definitely drives the point home, the sound on this album really characterizes the way the record comes across with that evilness. You see it on the more driven, pure black metal tracks. You see it on the songs that push more into the atmospheric realm, because that atmosphere is not there to create an ambiance. It's there to really bring that evil side of their sound, of their music, into fruition. It's palpable at times when you're listening to this record, and I love that aspect about it, because it's a record that doesn't feel like it's trying to be something that it's not. It feels very natural, it feels very organic, it sounds very natural, it sounds very organic, and that quality of sound, it's not taken away by how grimy the album is at times, by how dark the album is at times, and by how everything comes together in order to give you a very unique experience, but all these experiences are part of a much larger picture. That's how this whole record sound-wise comes together as one. Now within that sound experience, I have to talk about drums and guitars. First of all, I love the drums on this record because they play an incredible role in terms of creating momentum, in terms of pushing songs forward, grounding the record, creating heaviness. I mean, they're super diverse as far as the purpose of their sound is concerned, a little bit more compact in terms of the execution, but you cannot deny the impact that they have sung in and sung out in terms of creating all of those different ebbs and flows. Most of the ebbs and flows start off with the drum sound, and they really kickstart everything that comes after, and most often than not what comes after is the guitars. Driven at times, grimy, really pushing that black metal sound, but then adding some thickness, a little bit of thicker riffs here and there, bringing in some thrash metal into the scene, allowing the songs to have a little bit more substance, to have a little bit more texture, to feel a little bit bigger, to feel a little bit wider, and then incredible guitar solos through and through. There's not a single guitar solo on this album that is not going to mesmerize the listener, because they add value to the overall song composition, either bringing something of the more darker side of the song into the light, or bringing some of that melancholy, some of that sadness, some of that despair that exists in the more atmospheric, impactful tracks on this record into the light. It has great guitar solos, great execution, great guitar sound, really diverse, but in a very subtle kind of way that you still don't lose track of what you're listening to, where you are, and where you're going. This album really controls itself by keeping itself grounded, but then pushing the boundaries and pushing the limits on how far off the beaten path you can go without really distorting the roots of your existence. Now, as far as vocals are concerned, I have to start off by mentioning the clean vocals. They're part of the atmospheric elements that this record offers, because they're not always in the forefront. Very rarely the clean vocals are leading the pack. Most often than not, they come in as a thin layer, almost underneath everything else. But that thin layer really represents that evil side of the album coming to life. You don't need harshness, you don't need brutality to create an image of evil. Sometimes the most simple aspect, the most subtle aspect, the most simple aspect on the record could come across with evil intentions. And the clean vocals on this album, because of how simple they are and the approach that they took, definitely do that sung in and sung out. Now, they also didn't use them on every single track, which I definitely applaud, because then it would take a little bit of the impact. You want to savor it. You want to feel like you're getting something special in certain songs. You don't want to feel like this little element is starting to be overused throughout the entire record. I honestly felt that this album really pushed the line on that aspect, but walked that fine line and never really went too far off with it. And that was an important element vocally to keep this album dynamic, to keep this album engaging. Now, the harsher vocals bring darkness, bring aggression, but perhaps more so than anything else, they bring a lot of intensity, but great tonality, great delivery, also knowing the style of delivery that you have to change depending on how the song moves, on the overall mood of the track. Not just having a one style and a one-size-fits-all approach, sung in and sung out, but rather understanding the individual dynamics and characteristics of each song, and then slightly adapting to what that song is trying to be, or what that song is trying to give the listener. This is important because, once again, it keeps the album grounded in one single element, but it also allows that element to expand beyond its boundaries and feel a little bit more dynamic than usual. All around, this is an album that feels dark, sounds dark, and it has incredible evilness behind it. But it's not made off of cliche or artificial elements. They understand exactly who they are, their sound, and it comes across in a very clear and organic manner. This makes the album way more impactful because it doesn't feel overly created, overly produced, and perhaps overly thought about. It feels a lot more raw. That raw energy that the album has really allows the energy of the record to never stay still across any single song. Now, as far as favorite tracks are concerned, I want to start off with Into. This is technically the second track on the album, but it's technically the first because the first one is an intro track. Now, this song has a lot of intensity, has a lot of darkness, and has this cold sound to it. Not always driven. It's a song that comes in waves. It's a song that uses the drums to shape the movement of the track, and then uses the clean vocals in a very subtle way in order to infuse some atmospheric elements into how you're going to perceive this track, how you're going to perceive that darkness, how you're going to perceive that evilness. Very dynamic. It's a song that has a lot of movement, that doesn't follow single patterns, that constantly changing, going a little bit faster, going a little bit slower, adding a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. It's a song that feels like it's constantly growing, that's constantly evolving. But that dark underbelly, that stays true from start to finish, regardless of the movement, regardless of the momentum that the song picks up. The guitar solo on this song is really interesting because they use the clean vocals underneath it at times, and the clean vocals underneath it as a layer with that solo on top makes that portion of the track feel so eerie. It gives you goosebumps, and it's the perfect combination because it kind of blends everything and all the different ebbs and flows that the track had up until that point. Really a nice touch in order to create a song that's super engaging, super dynamic, and really fun to listen to. Next you have Silver and Steele. This is my favorite song on the album, perhaps because it's the most unique and different song that you're gonna find. I would call this a black metal ballad. That's how it comes across, because it has two momentums. This song is either almost melancholic, feeling very stripped down, with the clean vocals taking charge. The only song on this album that allows, on a consistent basis, almost from beginning to end, for the clean vocals to be the lead character in the storytelling process. And in those portions of the song, the mood goes all the way down to the basement, and then from there goes all the way up to the attic, with a lot of aggression, a lot of intensity, coming really violent to the forefront, and not necessarily creating a bridge that connects those two worlds and makes the move a little bit more subtle. No, you're going from all the way at the bottom to all the way at the top, from all the way at the top all the way at the bottom, making the song incredibly chaotic from a first glance point of view, but feels so right in the overall design and in the overall delivery. The solo is also phenomenal. Best solo on the record is in this song. In my opinion, it captures the essence of the track perfectly. Not that the others don't, but this one gives it a little bit of an extra push. It really captures that melancholic side of the track incredibly well, and it enhances that feeling times 1,000. And that allows you to see this track completely different, not just for the elements that it has, not just for the vocal approach to be also very different, very unique in terms of having a leading role, but also the overall atmosphere of this track is completely different from anything else. It doesn't hide itself, it just puts everything right in front of the listener. Last but not least, grant us his love. The drums and guitars on this song are demolishing together as one, in separate lanes, but together as one, creating a dark, powerful force that feels like it's always approaching, it's always coming at you and getting closer and closer by the second. The vocals, the harshness of the vocals adds a lot to the experience. It allows the song to feel even more relentless in its nature. It adds also a different vibe to how you're going to see this song, because it becomes a lot more direct. It's a song that becomes a lot more driven, not just because of the sound, but how the vocals control that sound movement. Now it also has thicker guitars, bringing in a different feel, taking away from that driving force in order to become a little bit heavier, thicker, not necessarily slower, but heavier and thicker with more volume, so there's more coming at you and is not necessarily piercing through, which happens throughout most of the track. Now, closing the song with trumpets, the last minute of the song is pretty much trumpets. It's a really interesting way of closing a track that had this incredible movement, it had this incredible intensity, this incredible drive, and then when the trumpets come in, the song nearly stops or slows down to a screeching halt. But it slows down in such a cool manner. It's such a finale. Like, this song has this great essence of ending, of there's nothing left. Like, the trumpets have rang, and this is it. Everything is in front of you. The offering is there. You take it or you leave it. It's a really incredible track from not only how it's designed, but how well it's put together and how well it's delivered. That closing would almost make this a much better closing track for the record than the one that they have, if you're not going to go with an outro. Because I would have used this song as my closing track and then add a few more trumpets afterwards as just a simple outro track. I think that outro track with the trumpets would finalize the record with an absolute exclamation mark the size of the Eiffel Tower. This is it. Black Anvil Regenesis, out November 4th on Season of Mist. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.